crossovers are great. In fact, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into bi-amping at all, or how our super tweeters work as well, but those are also relevant.
Yeah, can the Varus towers be bi-amped?
Funny you should ask. So Colin's gonna try to get a close-up on some of the Varus guts, as you will.
Oh, nice.
Ooh. Should we get closer to the camera here somehow? Here we have the Varus 3 Grand Tower crossover. And what's cool about this, and along with our Varus bookshelves and the concert tower, is that they are bi-ampable. What is bi-amping? Okay, bi-amping is where you take a single amplifier channel and you can feed either the bass woofers or the treble woofers. What you do is remove these jumpers here, then you go into your receiver settings and you have to change the amp mode that it's in. And you change it to the bi-amp mode. And usually on the back of your receiver, it's gonna be channels, if it's a 7-channel, it'll be channel 6 and 7, right? So maybe for your Onkyo, is that a 7 or a 9 channel? 9 channels. Yeah. So probably channels 8 and 9 are going to be the ones that you would use for the bi-amp. So it doesn't matter whether you're using channel 1, just as long as the left and the right feed to each speaker, you know what I mean? So to break it down, normally you would use channels number 1 and 2 for your left speaker and your right speaker. Right? With bi-amping, you can use channel number 1 and 2 for your left speaker, and then you can use channel 8 and 9 for your other speaker.
Got it.
And the reason, so here's what confuses people. It doesn't matter which amp channel actually feeds any of which speaker's binding post. The amp channel is going to be sending a full range signal because that's all the receiver knows how to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's going to send a full range signal. The only thing that matters about what you hear on the flip side is what it plugs into. So for example, here we're only feeding your bass woofers. If you plug into the bass woofers first, you can still reattach the top and bottom post, and then the rest of your speaker is going to kick in. So you'll get the mid-range and the tweeter from this once you re-engage your jumpers.
Right.
What's the purpose, you may ask?
Does it make that much of a difference?
A lot of people think scientifically, yes, the theory backs it up. What it really comes down to is if you are using everything on one AVR, everything's going to be running through the same internal power transformer. So you're not necessarily getting more juice per se, per each speaker, because it's all still running through the same main power transformer. Whereas if you do, separates, or if you have 2 different receivers that you're using, well, now you've got 2 different power transformers. And so that's when you really can notice and reap the benefits of bi-amping. The other scenario, which is actually more common, is this is more outside of home theater. I think bi-wiring and bi-amping is more done in 2-channel setups, because a lot of those integrated amplifiers, they have an A channel and a B channel. So from there, that's where, those guys, I mean, they're dedicated amps specifically for that. Those guys can handle bi-amping and things like that. Whereas, your entry-level Denon, you might not even hear much of a difference if you start bi-amping with that.
When you do have a situation like you have an integrated amplifier and you're just powering 2 channels or 2 speakers in a hi-fi setting, how does that affect the sound?
So you get more current flow, electrical current going through to the speaker.
Benefits would be like, a little more presence out of it. Your speakers are just going to seem a little more lively. Obviously with more power going to it, your dynamics are going to be way better. Faster transient responses. Sure.
Yes.
But, I've talked to a lot of people about it, and there's some that will swear by it up and down all day long and say, yeah, absolutely, I noticed a difference. I've also talked to a handful of customers that are like, yeah, I tried it. Sure, it was a little bit bigger, but for the amount of wire I had to buy, it wasn't worth it for me. It didn't work for my situation. And so a lot of times when that comes up, should I buy wire or buy amp or, whatever, I say, if you can do it, go for it. Try it. Try anything that your audio system is capable of, safely. But, like I said, a lot of people will notice a difference. Some might not. There's a lot of debate over it, on the internet and that sort of thing. And, I think it's one of those things that also with a lot of things, home theater and 2-channel related, it comes down to how picky you are. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you're like one of those guys like me that has to have something plugged into every single spot that is available, I'd be the type of person like, oh, I can buy amp. Yep, I'm going to try it and see if it's awesome, and then some people discover the setting on their receiver after they've owned it for 3 years and they're like, what's a buy amp?
Yeah, right.
So we've gotten a ton of calls like that. People who have our first version of the Veris and, well, these gold jumpers have been on the back forever, but what is this? And so you start to explain and then they go, oh, well, yeah, that might be a little bit more than I can chew, that type of thing.
Right.
Halfway through it and they're like, yeah, you know what, actually.
Let me just stop you right there.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's fun, again, it's like, it's more power to it. And, the theory makes sense. And it just comes down to whether or not you perceive a noticeable positive difference. Worth doing if you have the option safely.
But you would probably recommend that more in a hi-fi setting rather than home theater.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because source, your source content is going to make a big difference too. Music's more consistent. Whereas theater, there's spikes, there's dips, there's quiet parts, there's loud parts, and yeah, that could be more of a reason to see tweeters get burnt out or something like that. You have a ton of power and then all of a sudden a building explodes and, then you got a ton of power going to your speakers. But yeah, definitely more of a 2-channel thing for sure.
I don't know if this is opening up a can of worms. I don't know if we don't necessarily have to go down this road, but just because of the loudness wars and how things are mixed and mastered nowadays when it comes to music, because you mentioned bi-amping your speakers in a hi-fi setting would help with dynamics, but at the same time, when you look at the waveform, it's almost peak to peak, the entire song. There almost are no dynamics anymore unless you're listening to like classical music. So would that still have an effect on even modern music today by amping when everything just seems to be mastered so almost to zero?
Right. I think being a musician, much like us, there would be more subtle things that you would notice. The snare drum gets snappier, the guitar tone comes out, just a little bit more, like maybe a little grittier. Yeah. Heck, we noticed it like we were A/Bing our Nova 6T towers against the Veris 6T towers when we first got them in, and I threw on Survival by Muse. And so that track has like, a lot of choir voices and stuff like that, but then these pounding huge drums come in and, really vicious guitar licks come in. And it's like the snap of that snare drum going between speakers. I mean, you'd notice a difference in just the way that sounded flipping speakers. And so, again, changing amplifiers, changing your wiring configuration. I mean, it's not gonna be a night and day difference, but to the right person with the right sense of listening skills, I guess. Yeah, like I said, I think you'd notice, more of a snap in the snare, or, a little punchier bass sound, or, maybe the kick drum goes from like being, in the room and present to a little more of a thump in the chest kind of thing,
Right.
It's little things like that again comes down to how picky you are. Somebody that just has music for background and just kind of while they're working and stuff, not really concentrating on it, probably might not notice as much of a difference as somebody that's like sitting and actively listening,
Right.
So yeah, I think it's kind of those subtle things.
Isn't that the ultimate goal of audiophiles and like hi-fi nerds, is to create a space in which it's almost as if you're in the studio with the musicians?
Absolutely. That's kind of always the goal. You never want it to sound like you're just listening to speakers. You're listening to the music. The speakers are reproducing the music. So it's like, comes down to that whole thing of like, how natural can you get with, the most minimal amount of coloration to it. And there again, you can have the best speakers, but if you're in a room that has terrible acoustics, they're probably not going to perform very well.
Right.
1,000 variables. I always come back to that. You're like, well, yeah, there's 10 other things that are going to affect that, but yeah,